that for a moment. That's a lot of pain.
Yeah.
One person every 40 seconds. And like your circumstance, there's many more that think about it and attempt suicide, who are often left out of the conversation, who survive. But that's thought to be 20 times the number of people, those 700,000 people per year that die from suicide.
And, you know, it's wild because I remember what I felt like when I attempted. And I attempted by overdose. And I can remember feeling like I had reached a point to where it's almost like I wasn't thinking anymore. And it was just almost like this automatic action of just grabbing pills and swallowing them. And, you know, look, I'd been struggling with substance use for over 10 years at that point. And so overdosing wasn't something I was, you know, new to. I'd had a few almost overdoses. I'd had a few minor overdoses. But this felt distinctly different. And I can remember I was sitting on a couch like this, and I started to feel very strange. I started to sweat a lot. I started to get very nauseous, which was not, you know, I had no idea what I was going to experience. And I can remember I tried to stand up off the couch. And as I did, my entire right side of my body cramped. It felt like I got stabbed in the right side with a hot knife, and I like buckled over. And as I did, I tried to catch myself on the coffee table in front of me. And all this vision just starts to go black from my periphery. That feeling when you get kind of lightheaded, when you stand up too quickly, your blood pressure drops and you get all lightheaded. It was like that, but very intense, very kind of claustrophobic feeling. And I had this realization that what was happening was I was experiencing the last minute of my life, the last second of my life. And believe me when I tell you I was terrified. And I don't remember what happened next. I just remember waking up on the floor several hours later in a puddle of my own vomit in a pile of fast food garbage. And it took me, I would say, the better part of the next hour to really come to grips with it, with what had just taken place. And when I did really come to understand what had just taken place, I have never felt such relief in my entire life. And that was the moment that my life changed. Because that relief can only take place if there was something about my life and myself that I loved enough that even though I knew what I was about to experience was the most painful day of my life, I was relieved to still be a part of it. That I was relieved that I had failed. That this was something I actually didn't want to leave. I wanted to be here. And look, I was that guy. I was that guy that you probably know someone like this person, like this, like who I was. And in fact, if you were a friend of mine back then and you loved me, or if you were a family member of mine and you loved me, you would have come up to me and you would have said, Adam, what the fuck are you doing? Don't you see what your drug use is doing? Don't you see what it's doing to yourself and to your family? Why won't you stop? And I would have looked you in the eye and said, fuck you, Simon. You don't know me. You have no idea how painful my life is, and you don't know the relief I get when I use. So unless you're here to solve my life for me right now, this is how I'm going to live my life. And you know what? If this shit costs me 10 years, fine. I'm fine with it. And I used to say that all the time.
So you feel misunderstood by everyone.
Yeah. And, you know, I think about it now. You know, if I had been successful on August 21st of 2012, you know, what would my family not give up for 10 more years with me? God, I used to say, you know, if this cost me 10 years, fine, all the time. I used to do it all the time. 10 years. You know, what would I not do for my friends who I've lost? And I've lost 6 friends to suicide and overdose since getting sober. What would I not do for 6 more days with those people, for 10 more days with those people, for 10 more minutes with those people? God, you know, it's like the things that we choose to believe have real consequences, but they're not just on us. They're on the people that we care about. And I really did come to realize that what suicide actually is, and I'm going to say this with certainty, what suicide actually is, it is not someone wanting to take their life. It is someone wanting to end their pain. That's what it is. It's a pain that they just don't understand. They don't know how it got that bad. They don't know how to get out of it. They're ashamed that it got that bad, and they're ashamed that they don't know how to get out of it, and they feel incredibly alone, and they just cannot deal with tomorrow because today was so unbearable that tomorrow is not a place they want to be, and so they end it. They're not ending their life. If they could solve it with ease and repeatability, if there was a sense that they could figure this out, oh my God, would they ever grab a hold of it? They would. There's a lot of talk, you probably hear this, the belief that suicide is a selfish act. I can understand why people think that way.
I think to be honest, I've probably thought that myself at some point.
Hey, I guarantee you, I bet I thought that too before, I went through what I went through. And I think it comes from a perspective of looking at someone who's struggling and going, well, you know what? I know what the worst day of my life felt like, and I never wanted to end my life. How selfish do you have to be to want to end your life just because you've had a hard day? And what you're trying to do is create a sense of separation that could never be you, because that's a safe thing to do. Say, oh, that could never be me. I'm going to prove it to you, every single person here. I've had awful days, and I never thought about ending my life. That's a selfish person over there, and I'm not a selfish person. But a much more accurate way to think about it is, I've had really awful days. I've never wanted to end my life. I can't imagine what that person's going through. Conversation over. You don't have a right to speak about whether it's selfish or not, because you can't even imagine what that person is going through. The only thing you should say is, how do we find out how to help that person? Like when I told you, people would always come up to me and they'd say, why won't you stop? That's the average question asked in recovery. How do we get you to stop? Well, we're going to figure out how to get you to stop using. Let's figure out how to get you to stop using for the rest of your life. Do you know how terrifying that is to ask of a person whose whole sense of safety is bonded with their substance? That I think that's actually a detrimental question to ask, and actually a very detrimental thing to suggest of a person in recovery. I think a much more valuable way to approach recovery is to say to that person, why does your use make sense? Why for you is using so important? Why for you does using a meaningful act in your life? And if we can answer that question, let's start using that answer to reorganize your life, your priorities and values, so that we can help you craft a life where your use becomes less necessary. You might actually use one day. That's okay. We're not trying to get you to never use again. We're trying to get to a point where your life feels so safe that use is no longer disordering your ability to be safe and healthy. That's recovery. To create a sense that abstinence is the solution is inaccurate. People aren't addicts because substances exist in the world. There are people who use and are not dealing with substance use disorder. The reason why the use becomes disordered is rooted in a sense that their life without it is too difficult to deal with. So the solution is reorganizing the life. When I checked into treatment, I found out within 72 hours that I had type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, erectile dysfunction, drug-induced bipolar disorder, suicidal depression, anxiety disorder, sleep disorder, attention deficit disorder, and obsessive compulsive personality disorder. They put me on a cabinet's worth of medication, and they told me, here's what we're going to do. You're going to be on these medications for the rest of your life. I want you to go to a program where you can affirm that you're an addict every single day, and we need you to abstain from substance use. That's recovery. And if you can do that long enough, there's a chance that your life is going to become an enjoyable place to be. And for whatever reason, and I had no right to believe I knew any better, I just felt that was wrong. I felt like that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, and it kind of like rubbed me the wrong way. What I wanted to do was reverse engineer the experience of feeling fully alive in a meaningful way. I wanted to be the architect of a life that felt like such a safe, secure, and hopeful place that I didn't need drugs anymore. That even if they were in the environment, I wouldn't feel compelled to use them because I didn't want to not be present. I wanted to be here. I I wanted to show up. I wanted to have a bad day. I wanted to have great days. I wanted to have so-so days. I wanted my life to feel like what I wanted to be connected to. And
So what was it though that changed your perspective?
I think it was the sense that, number one, I had to create an identity around being an addict. And I don't know why. I think it's that I'm kind of a stubborn prick, but like people telling me that I had to be something made me really angry. I think at that time in my life, I was a very stubborn guy, and I didn't want to create an identity that I was an addict. It didn't feel right. You know, it's not who I was. It was what I was struggling with.
But it took all of this to sort of come to a head, August 21st.
Oh, yeah.
To then go into this clinic where you were diagnosed and given these labels.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I checked into treatment in Tucson, Arizona. And within 72 hours, I'd gotten all these diagnostic tests done. I had, look, detox is a very uncomfortable experience. You're put through a bunch of psychological evaluations, medical evaluations, physical evaluations. You feel like a criminal, you feel dehumanized. But it is, in fact, it is careful. It's caring. That's what's happening. These people are caring for you. It may not feel like it, especially if you're a person who's new in recovery and you're thinking back to that experience. You're like, God, that was awful. They treated me like a criminal. They treated me like an experiment. No, they weren't. They were trying to figure out how to best care for you. People who engage in substance use to the degree where their life is disordered, typically engage in other behaviors that put other areas of their life at risk, right? We don't really, for one, I basically ate whatever the hell I wanted, mostly junk food. I engaged in alcohol use, opiate use, stimulant use. I barely slept well. I certainly didn't drink a lot of water. It was mostly just Coca-Cola. I would also go out partying. I would do a lot of things that would put a lot of other parts of my health at risk, metabolic risk, and so psychological risk. So they want to know, where are you? What else is going on? How do we best care for you? And that's when I found out that I had diabetes and heart disease, and I knew about the erectile dysfunction, and I just felt like in order to ever feel like life was going to be a place I wanted to be a part of, I had to solve, number one, feeling like my body was a place I wanted to actively show up and be present for, that my body felt like a safe, secure, and hopeful place to be. I'm going to keep using those three words, safe, secure, and hopeful. It's very important. And I had recently attended an event hosted by a man named Rip Esselstyn. About a year before I overdosed and tried to suicide, I got the opportunity to hear a man named Rip Esselstyn speak about something that I had never heard of at the time, which was a plant-based diet.